Well, g'day everybody. It's Benjamin Morgan of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and today I am joined by one of the great friends of general aviation that we have here in Australia, which is Susan McDonald, Senator for Queensland of the LNP. Welcome, Susan.
Oh, hi, Ben, and thanks for having me on what is such a sacred day in Australia. But we've got some things to talk about.
Absolutely. Up at 5 o'clock this morning with members of the Wagga City Aero Club to head on down to the Cenotaph to be there for the Anzac Day service. And I understand you yourself you were up in Queensland there attending.
Yeah, Ben, I was at this amazing, well, yesterday afternoon, they had a memorial for the Vietnam nurses who have never been acknowledged or had a place to commemorate them. And then today we were joined by a lot of veterans from Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, as well as a serving not veteran, member of the army who gave the most fabulous, moving address. So Morven is a tiny little town, but huge of heart, and the number of the names on the cenotaph as a reminder of their contribution to Australia's place in history in both World War One and World War Two.
Certainly see it in a lot of my travels in a lot of the remote and regional townships that you visit. There's always
Yeah,
a cenotaph in town, and it's incredible how many names are on these structures. And it's a really poignant reminder that so many of the young boys, and in many cases women, that served and lost their lives were from
yeah,
regional and remote communities.
yeah, that's right. And so right across the country, today people are pausing to pay respect to that contribution. And it's something that I think is now really ingrained in our psyche as being, that spirit of mateship, of working together, of resilience, of being self prepared and organised. I think that's carried through to Australians more broadly, and particularly the part of the country where I am now that's just gone through another round of really terrible floods at Eromanga, Thargomindah, Quilpie, Junda, Adavale. So many towns that have just been horribly affected, Ben.
Look, and that's such a great segue ultimately to the purpose of today's conversation. In opening, I've said you've been such a great friend to general aviation. You continue to be a great friend to general aviation, which is an industry comprising of just 35,000 pilots nationally. But those pilots rely on a very broad network of airport infrastructure that connects all points of Australia. In many cases, the vast majority of these airports are out in regional communities, and some of those communities that you've mentioned are currently enduring emergencies in terms of floods, and also communities that have endured horrific fires. And aviation has played a great role in being the difference. Now, you've been speaking to me earlier, and you've said that you've been out visiting these airports, but you've also been observing something about the condition of the airports that you've been in attendance to.
Yeah. So, these are the places where, so specifically, if we think about Thargomindah, a town that went underwater, and in the days following, from Quilpie, but from Thargomindah, where, of course, once again, it was only the airfield that was above water, and so the pilots who gathered from all over regional Queensland to come and airlift people off their roofs, out of their properties, to get them to safety, and then to go back and to drop fodder. Also, the cameramen, who went out and to document this terrible disaster so that the rest of us can know how we're going to support and help them. So airfields play such an enormously important role in our particularly regional and remote places. So, once again, I see that there's $8 million for regional airports right across Australia. It's just not enough because at some of those airfields alone, they need millions of dollars to strengthen tarmacs for heavier aircraft, because everything's getting heavier, to allow the RFDS in, to allow for emergency evacuations, and of course for tourism. And so many of your members are such great supporters of regional Australia by flying in, having a weekend somewhere, And I have to tell you that Eromanga has the most extraordinary dinosaur museum, fantastic motel and accommodation, but people are cancelling because they don't think they can go, and so I've got no doubt that your members will, now that they've heard this, book themselves a flight into Eromanga or to Thargomindah, Charleville, Morven, somewhere, and have a few days because it is a great part of the world. It's green shoots, and anyway, but it is back to my point. Aviation, general aviation, saves lives, provides transport, and how we better nurture the infrastructure that allows general aviation to train, to do maintenance, to have charter businesses or aviation tourism is something that I think we've taken our eye off the ball and we need to do a better job.
Well, as you were kind of saying, general aviation really has that fighting Anzac spirit about it because it's an industry that's been under attack now for many decades. It's fought off the battles of airport privatisation, and those battles are still raging. We've been fighting battles with the complexity and the depth of the aviation regulatory environment to which we're trying to exist within, and that's a battle that's still ongoing. And then we also have an enormous battle raging with CASA AvMed and its pursuit to make it exceptionally difficult for pilots to maintain their medicals. So we have this incredibly complex array of challenges, and ultimately our industry is very dependent on senators such as yourself and others within the parliamentary system that we're able to educate and support so that these battles can be fought not only on the grassroots of aviation, but within the political frameworks where it's so critical.
Well, Ben, a perfect example. I landed in Winton the other day. This is a town that I know well and love. And when I would have gone there in the 1970s and 80s, even the early 90s, for a big community event, a field day, something like the 150 years, even a party, a private celebration, there would have been 10 of private aircraft there at the strip, just demonstrating the vibrancy and the importance of general aviation. I was absolutely shocked to land there the other day, and apart from a QantasLink plane, my charter, and two tied down choppers, there was no other aviation. So until we can start talking about what is the KPIs of success for CASA, for our statutory bodies for aviation, and I think there's stuff like how many young people are we successfully training, not building up a big HEC step, but successfully training. How many aircraft are registered and flying, not in sheds because people can't afford to have them out. You know, how successful is our general aviation industry? Because, of course, without that, we don't have people going through to the bigger airlines, and they have such a different culture. But we don't see these big aircraft on the fields at Winton and Longreach, the places where we grow food and fibre. We mine a lot of important minerals and commodities, and the families and communities there desperately need aviation, whether it be for health, for travel, for transport. There's so many reasons why, like you, I'm passionate about general aviation, and I'm afraid that we are failing when we see important areas that have no aircraft parked there, which means that the community, the aviation administrators, I think, are failing. They're failing in developing an industry that thrives.
I think we were really starting to make some progress during the previous term of government, especially towards those final 2 years. And I know there's a lot of people in the industry that are very critical at times of the speed at which change is being achieved. But there was a huge amount of work that the previous government had actually embarked on that it really didn't get enough credit for. And Susan, you were hugely instrumental from a Senate perspective in driving what were landmark inquiries that really started to focus on the nub of the issue, which was to start addressing the concerns regarding the culture of the regulator, the impact that was having downstream within the organisation, on its capability, on its product that it was producing, but more importantly, on the industry. And so we are obviously in an election process right now. It's going to go back to the hands of the Australian public. And
Yeah.
obviously, if we do see a Liberal National Coalition again form government, I'm hopeful. I'm actually very hopeful, given
Mm,
the conversations that we've had and the conversations we've also had with our Liberal colleagues, that
mm,
they do want to move the needle. I think there's a lot of
mm.
intellectual property that's been built up over the last term of government in terms of
Yeah.
understanding where some of these challenges lie. So maybe just some thoughts and reflections from yourself on maybe what was being achieved in that last term and maybe what
Yeah.
we might have to look forward to.
Yeah, well, certainly the Senate inquiry that we did into general aviation, I thought was incredibly powerful, and I once again thank people who were brave enough to come forward, because so many people said, "I'll talk to you privately, but I
Yep.
can't be on the record because I'm afraid of the repercussions from the regulators." I mean, that's a shocking situation to be in. And so I think the recommendations of that Senate committee were very powerful. I was frustrated that following the change of government, that once again aviation, um, more broadly, particularly general aviation, has once again slipped off the radar of the government. And I think it is to Australia's detriment. We are a huge country, and the only way to get around in an affordable and speedy manner is aviation. And I don't believe that the recreational licenses, I think that that was a mistake to go down that route. I think that anyway, that's my personal view, that there needs to be more work on making aviation more accessible and better regulated, so that we can go back to the days of people being able to afford to own and operate an aircraft in the same way. Remember, huge distances, that they owned and operated um, a motor vehicle. And that we shouldn't be saying that this is some sort of recreation. No, it's not. This is how families get around safely. It's how cattle stations and mining companies do their business, and now insurance. So during these floods, we discovered that if cameramen, other people were going out on chartercraft, that insurance companies were saying, "We won't insure you. We won't insure you to go into a flood zone." I mean, what sort of madness is this? That the very sort of aircraft that is the only ones who can safely get into places where roads are cut and people are bogged and floodwaters are rising, that they're being denied coverage of insurance. I mean, it's a terrible reflection of how we think about our aviation
I
industry.
think it also just shows how far things have fallen in terms
Mm.
of a broader, more mainstream understanding of the value contribution.
Ah,
I just want to
yeah.
come back to, I guess, a topic there that you've raised, because I think it flows in neatly to an issue that both you and I have had some extensive conversations
Mm.
around in regard to Les Woodall. Um,
Yeah.
there is no doubt I've testified in front of several Senate inquiries now in terms
Mm.
of what I believe to be a highly toxic culture of CASA, in the way that
Mm.
they lack proportionality when it comes to its surveillance and enforcement activities. If we compare the Civil Aviation Safety Authority to modern policing,
Mm.
a person can be involved in a minor road accident, but they don't
Mm.
face losing their house fighting a $1 million battle against the DPP, and face serious and almost
Mm.
insurmountable criminal consequences as a result of
Mm.
minor issues. Now, there's always going to be the outlier. There'll always be
Yeah.
somebody within the system that does something that warrants the heavy hand of regulation, enforcement, and
Mm.
action. But the vast majority of things that I have seen in over a decade of service to general aviation have been really misdemeanor type activities.
Yeah.
Now, I've mentioned his name, Les Woodall. We have a pilot right
Mm.
now up in Queensland that has effectively faced financial ruin. His family has been destroyed, the business has been destroyed, and it relates to a flight in which they were conducting, which was in accordance with what they had been approved to do by the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. So they weren't doing anything that they hadn't disclosed that they intended to do or would be doing. They've undertaken the flight. The aircraft has suffered a catastrophic fuel system failure, which has
Mm.
resulted in an engine failure. And with just a very small number of seconds to make a command decision, the pilot
Mm.
elected to quickly turn the aircraft towards a beach. And sadly, and I say this wholeheartedly,
Mm.
sadly, it resulted in the aircraft not being able to effect a clean landing. It has come to
Mm.
grief. and there has been a young woman who's lost her life. Now, 3 people survived, 3 people's lives were saved. One, sadly and tragically, was lost. But now that pilot found himself in a situation where his last minute quick thinking and decisive action to get the aeroplane as close to the beach as he could so that people potentially were not going to drown landed him in a situation where he was criminally charged, taken to court, and pursued for a jail sentence. And shockingly, the Civil Aviation Safety Authority sent along expert witnesses to testify that if a pilot were to turn an aircraft in an engine out emergency, that would be contradictory to safe aviation and effectively labelled a pilot who would do such things as unprofessional. And then that was picked up on by the jury, and the entire argument of the aircraft suffering a catastrophic engine failure as a result of something that the pilot had no control of was lost. And the jury focused on these statements made by the national regulator that effectively argued you're an unprofessional, unsafe pilot if you turn when the engine quits. Now, that court case has run to completion. Les has been found guilty, and he has faced a 2-year suspended jail sentence. But in doing so, there has now been case law created which will set precedent in future actions where if a pilot turns in an emergency, they're looking at jail time. Your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, I think you've summarised it really well, Ben. You know, in the context of at the time of that accident, there had been at least one, possibly two other accidents where light aircraft had ended up in water, had overturned. None of the passengers had been able to escape the plane and all perished. This was, I imagine, in Les's head. He had to make a decision in a quick time. And he was in circumstances that the engine had failed. He was not in this position through any other reason apart from an engine failure, regardless of what else was suggested at the time. So for other pilots who are thinking about this, the case law has now provided a precedent that pilot command, using your best judgment based on the circumstances that you have right now, can be overturned, and worse, that your best judgment in that situation can be considered a criminal action. I think all pilots, not just charters and general aviation, but the bigger airline pilots as well, should be looking at this decision and being very, very worried. I don't think we have ever seen anything like this before. And it is why I've been pleased to support a GoFundMe page to support Les's appeal, or in the first instance, to have a KC read the trial transcripts to make a recommendation on appealing this decision. I think this is a turning point for aviation in this country, and we should all get behind this appeal to ensure that pilots in command decisions are supported and their decisions upheld when they are made in the best example, the best decision they can make at that point in time. And to your point, whilst there was a tragic outcome on that flight, it could have been much, much worse. And there is no recognition of that. A jury who is very unsophisticated in the notions of aviation, I think made a decision that needs to be reviewed. And the decision needs to be reviewed with a view to an appeal. So, you know, I ask people to consider finding that GoFundMe page, putting a few dollars towards it, because as an industry, I don't think this could stand. I think it is incredibly dangerous, and there will be pilots down the track that will be very vulnerable to case law if we don't get this appeal carried out.
I agree with you entirely, and I've been contacted by so many people since we put the GoFundMe fundraiser up, with people questioning why AOPA would be stepping in to A, provide publicity to this, and B, also to generate fundraising. And as I've tried to explain to many people, is that there are multiple debates in this outcome, that I think need to be had. And there's no doubt
Yeah.
that there should have been a more robust debate on the fact that the Civil Aviation Safety Authority approved that air operator certificate to conduct those flights. And
Mm,
CASA tried to wash its hands of its responsibilities there, and they've tried to push this all downstream and to
mm,
make this simply a pilot error so that it almost bathes them clear of any form of
mm,
responsibility. And so that's one
mm.
debate that needs to be had. The second debate that needs to be had is that there was an engine failure. And there seems
Mm.
to be absolutely no focus on getting to the bottom of why did that engine fail? What was the
Yeah,
contributing reasons for the failure? Was it
yeah.
a lack of maintenance? Who was involved in maintaining that aeroplane?
Mm,
How was it the aircraft was being signed out, which put not only the pilot, but put those innocent passengers at risk that
mm,
day? The third
yeah,
debate, unfortunately, is the most important debate as well, which is that as a consequence, we now have this ghastly precedent,
yeah,
which in my decade of experience with AOPA, I can see this is going to be used and it will be manipulated into the
yeah,
future, and there will be innocent pilots who are going to find themselves facing jail time of varying lengths because this precedent has been set. So I agree with you, Susan. I was so impressed that you've been so passionate
mm,
about seeing to it that the rights of aviators be protected like
yeah,
this. And I think we need
yes,
more politicians like you that have developed
mm,
a keen understanding of what's
mm,
involved in aviation and what's at risk for the individuals who have to fly these airplanes.
yeah,
Because keeping in mind, without these charter businesses, I mean, the perfect outcome is we ban all of aviation and none of these problems will
absolutely.
exist, right?
That's
But the
right.
problem is it undermines our economy, it undermines
Yep,
tourism, it undermines regional
yep,
communities, and
yep,
you and I have both seen what can happen when those services are
yep,
withdrawn.
yep,
So it's not what we want to see happen. We've linked that GoFundMe to the AOPA Australia Facebook
mm,
page. I'll refresh that so it's at the very top for those that might be watching the
mm,
video live, but also those that will get to see this video over the coming week. And I certainly do encourage everyone. I think we've successfully raised around $21,000.
mm.
Susan, we need a bit more.
We
This is
need,
going to cost a lot of money.
yeah, it will, and it's already destituted the pilot and his family. I think it is. Anyway, it's another discussion about how expensive our legal system is to defend yourself. But you can donate anonymously. I've put money in. I've left my name on there because I think that this is an important agenda and cause to make sure that pilots of Australia of the future are protected. And I hope that people will consider, give what you can. I know there's a lot of demands on people, but this one I think professionally, as much as anything else, is incredibly important for Australian and Australian pilots. So I really appreciate your support on this, Ben, and AOPA's. And I say, let's test it. Let's test it. I think that's the right thing to do.
Well, Susan, you've been there on so many occasions. I've lost count of the number of times that I've been able to pick up the telephone and call you directly, and you are immediately available to say what's happening, how can I help.
Yeah,
You have been the difference on so many issues over this last 5 or 6 years. It's been incredible. And so I'm absolutely looking forward to continuing to work with you. And on
yeah,
behalf of all of our members, thank you. I was talking to Steve the other day. I know you know Steve. Like
yeah,
Steve was on the phone and he's like, I've already reached out to Susan and she's been
yeah,
incredible to be able to do
yeah,
things. And that is a great thing, Susan, that you've earned such a reputation in the industry through your care
mm,
of the concern. So it would be remiss of me at this point if I didn't allow you just a few minutes to maybe talk about the upcoming election and your
no,
colleagues. You've got some great
yeah,
candidates running across the
yeah,
system, and I know the great work of Bridget, the great work of
yeah,
David Littleproud, and others
yeah,
within the party. I was down here in Wagga
yeah,
trying to catch up with Michael McCormick as well.
yeah, yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah. Oh well, look, thank you, and it's a privilege to be able to represent other people who I'm so passionate about what they do. I've been in light aircraft literally my entire life. Obviously, not in command as a child, um, and talking about the difference that aviation makes to our far flung places. So to me, it's a privilege. But we are facing an election. I've been frustrated that we've seen a government come in and spend 3 years, doing nothing for general aviation or aviation more broadly. They're keen to talk about sustainable aviation fuel, but not planes and pilots to operate it. And the $8 million for the regional fund, I think, is a pittance when we know we need, tens of millions of dollars for individual strips to strengthen, lengthen, light, secure with fences into important regional communities. So, look, I think there's a choice, and I hope people will support me and my coalition colleagues wherever you might be. But, I don't want to make this too political. There is a clear choice for people. They'll make up their own minds. But I can tell you that general aviation and aviation more broadly runs in my blood. I will do everything I can to fight for individuals, businesses, and the sector more broadly. And long may we fly and prosper.
Well, more representatives like you in Parliament will be exactly what we need. One of the things that we had tried to get done just before, obviously, the change of government was to put in place a Friends of Parliament for aviation. And in the next term of government, hopefully, Susan, we can tick that box and we can finally get it done. There'd be a great opportunity there for a broader array of parliamentarians to develop a clear understanding. And I'll be looking forward to coming back down to Canberra and speaking with people and presenting and providing as much information as we can to assist you in that process. So thank you again, and thank you for making time for us on an Anzac Day to speak about aviation issues to our small community.
Well, I'll very quickly just finish on, did you know it was a World War I Australian pilot, Greg Peel, who sent £100 and a letter to John Flynn, you know this story, saying, I've just seen the impact that planes can make for distances and for medicine, and I recommend that you think about starting an aerial medical service. And of course, the RFDS was born from that. So, aviators have contributed so much to how it's changed regional Australia. And on this day, it seemed an appropriate story to tell.
And we certainly will continue to with your support. So thank you so much, Susan. I really do appreciate you making time. Okay, there you had it. Susan McDonald. What a friend to general aviation we have with her. Susan has just been remarkable over the time that I've been involved with AOPA Australia. I have lost count of the number of times where we have faced issues with members who may have been facing medical problems, pilots who found themselves in the crosshair, aviation businesses who were struggling or are struggling to get approvals sorted out, amendments to approvals sorted out. I have lost count of the myriad and broad array of challenges that our members have faced, but where I've been able to pick up the phone and call Susan McDonald and say, Susan, I need your help. The association is struggling to get cut through on this issue. And if you could write a letter, or you could make a phone call, or you could help direct us to be able to provide information through an inquiry. It's incredible how fast issues can change when parliamentarians bring the UV to these issues. And to speak to that, we can't do any of this work without the support of the aviation community. So each and every one of us as a participant in aviation ultimately have a responsibility to see to that you reach out when you are having difficulty. Let the association know, speak to us, inform us of what's happening so that we can also ensure that the parliamentarians are up to date and inform themselves, because they can only also be as effective as they are if we keep them primed with all the current events and activities taking place. Senate inquiries, for those, there are some out there that are very critical of those inquiry processes, and I admit even at times I've been very frustrated because you see the senators uncover large swaths of wrongdoing, but you wonder, how will this then move on to affect change? It's that old saying that UV kind of washes a great deal, and that is the more focus, the more light, the more exposure we put to the issues, the harder it gets for organisations like CASA or the Department of Infrastructure or others to do silly things that are damaging the industry. So we have to keep it up. I always say to members in presentations that I give, we have to be the ever vigilant association. Some people frown on the fact that we're out there constantly doing this work, because obviously no one likes to hear someone constantly raising the negatives of the industry. But just think about this: each and every time we overcome a challenge, each and every parliamentarian we bring on board and we make them a supporter of aviation, the closer we get to a better, stronger, more viable, sustainable, successful general aviation industry. Change for things that are important never comes overnight. It comes through hard work, and AOPA Australia is exactly that. It is a hard work organisation to get us to the end of the journey eventually, which is a much, much better general aviation industry. So I say this at the end of every single video. What am I about to say? If you like the work that AOPA Australia does each and every day of the week to try and advance the cause of general aviation and to build stronger relationships in Parliament with people who can be a powerful voice and a guiding light for us, then please do put your support into the association. It is just $159 to be a member, to be part of the team that is out there fighting for you and your industry and your future in aviation. And with that, it is always a great pleasure and an honour to be able to represent you all. I look forward to catching up with everyone again very, very soon. Take care.